I'm Troy Julian Gibson, Vice President of Indiana Minority Health Coalition, and welcome again to the fourth episode of Minority Health Matters. Minority Health Matters television show speaks and concentrates on things that are all about minority health. Today, I have a great guest, and for the fourth show, this is incredible. Her name is Danyette Smith, and she is the Director of Domestic Violence Prevention for the City of Indianapolis. Say hello, Danyette.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And also, I would be remiss not to mention my great and wonderful CEO, Carl Ellison, who is also joining us via Zoom. Carl, say hello.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be part of the conversation.
Well, today, the purpose with this being Domestic Violence Month, we want to shine the light on domestic violence prevention. And Indiana Minority Health Coalition is having an event on October 26th, and Danyette will be our special guest. Today, we're going to talk a little about her job and why it was created, and she's got some very interesting things to tell you about domestic violence prevention. Danyette, welcome to the show, and can you tell me a little about how the city named you the Director of Domestic Violence Prevention?
Definitely. So the city named me the director just, I believe, from the passion, also the experience that I had with domestic violence, which ultimately led me to being who I needed. So that's kind of how I got into this. They seen the work that I was doing and took me to a meeting and was like, we want you. Like, how can we implement the things that you're doing at a higher level for the city? Like, how can we get that?
Okay. So tell us a little about, statistic-wise, where Indiana stands as far as domestic violence, because I know, especially since the pandemic, it's always affected everyone, but I think, you've got kids, LGBT, black, white, brown, and everything in between. Everyone knows someone that has been affected by domestic violence. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. One thing we can say for Indiana alone, we've increased 183% when it comes to domestic violence related deaths.
Since when?
And that's since COVID started. So that once COVID hit, by the end of 2020 to 2021, we were able to see that drastic increase within our state, in addition to the needs that happened when COVID hit with lack of shelters, and that increase could have came, and most of the times it came from, the job shut down. More people were at home, which means more attention was in the home, and the abuse escalated more to where it's not just individuals taking abuse, but now they're calling 911. Now they're utilizing the services and the resources that typically they wouldn't use because they would be at work majority of the time, or they would be able to leave majority of the time. So they use those resources drastically. We also know that domestic violence and the resources that are out here typically are not used by the African, or let's just say the Black and Brown community. It's disproportionately a decrease in reference to the services that are in their areas. So that was one of the things that we wanted to really look at, is seeing how can we be boots on the ground in the community for those Black and Brown individuals that may see that lack of resources within their community, or even seek those resources.
Okay, Cole, so can you tell me a little about going back to domestic violence prevention? The city saw a need.
Yes. And
so they named you director. What exactly do you do day to day?
So there's 4 components that I brought to the city program. One, the system component. We want to make sure that the community and the system are aligned together. How do we do that? That means we're meeting and seeing what the beat officers, which are the street officers, what do they know? What are they doing? What resources are they equipped with? Working alongside the detectives, understanding what that detective role looks like when it's related to domestic violence, and then standing alongside of those victims who are working with detectives, so that way they know not only do they have the support in one of the most scariest and fearful times of their life with working with a detective, knowing that there's probably a case, having that support, and then having a voice, that way the questions that they wouldn't know to ask the detective or to get from the detective, they can get them by having someone else there alongside of them. And then ultimately leading to the prosecutors in the courtrooms, like having that support in the courtrooms. We wanted to make sure that that was something that was offered to those who are trying to flee or have fled domestic violence. The other component is the community. Like, we are able to pull the data that shows us what areas have the most calls and runs from IMPD related to domestic violence. We take those numbers and then we literally are going in those areas. So those zip codes that have the high call volumes, we know that those households are affected by domestic violence. Bringing resources door to door, bringing events in their area, so that way they know these resources are available. Please utilize them. So bringing that prevention and awareness into that community. And then making sure that the community knows, what's going on. One of the events that we have coming up on the 26th as well in the evening is literally the flow is what it's called. So individuals in the community should understand and know, like, what are the limits with IMPD and when they arrive on a scene for a domestic, what they can and can't do. Also, the detectives, the same way that we've learned it, we've been able to sit down with each entity to see what exactly it is, so we could know when we're pouring into victims and survivors. And then in addition, the victim and survivor component of the piece with this programming is letting the victims and survivors know that, like, we're here. If you need a protection order, we can do that. If you need to flee, we can connect you to where you can flee. We wanted to make sure that we're the streamlined system. So we could have been a program that says, okay, here are all the agencies within the city. Call this number, which is majority of the times a resource paper that most organizations or businesses or people give. Like, here's all the numbers to domestic violence. But we want to eliminate that. Like, you should only have one number, do one intake, and then we're able to streamline you directly to where you need to go instead of calling 3 numbers and then you're hearing, no, we don't do that, call this number, no. So we literally wanted to stop that re-traumatizing of victims and get them to one place. That way we can lead you exactly to where you need to go. And then that last component is domestic violence agencies. I created a monthly gathering to where all of the Marion County, Indianapolis domestic violence agency directors, we meet, so that way we can be on the same page. We can know what each other's agencies are doing, what we're stopping, what we're seeing in the community, where's their lack, where's more needed at, and how can we as a team come together in this fight against domestic violence. So those 4 components is what the city was missing, just by me doing the work for 8 years before I got this position, in addition to speaking to some of those agencies and seeing what is the need that we need to have and come together with for the community.
I see. Sounds super smart, super efficient. You know what I mean? You're not re-traumatizing people. So
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to let Carl Ellison, our CEO, talk about why he thought it was important for Indiana Minority Health Coalition to dedicate this year's annual event to domestic violence. Carl?
Well, thanks, Troy. Yeah, we thought this year this event would be especially important for us to focus on domestic violence because we had one of our former interns who was a victim of domestic violence. So this has directly impacted the IMHC family, as I'm sure it does many families, when you find that someone you know, someone you've interacted, someone with whom you've seen their promise for the future, affected by something unexpected by all of us. So this touched our family. And so we want to do what we can to both call attention to it, but also provide strategies for anybody who may know somebody or anybody affected by this issue to get the help that they need. Now, Danyette, I would note that the system you just outlined for Indianapolis is relatively comprehensive, and that's great. But I was wondering, how does 211 factor into you? Do you get referrals from 211? Because historically, that was the place you called to get linked into services. So what's the relationship between 211 and your city agency?
So we've met with 211, and of course that is something that we are on as a domestic violence resource. But one thing we know is 211 is a resource bank, so they will still have all of the domestic violence resources as well, and they do come to like advocates meetings so they can understand what that domestic violence, what are the programs doing. They understand that as well. The goal is with 211 again, as just a regular individual on the other end that's going to connect you to a resource. We are the resource. We are the source, and that's what makes us different. Like you're literally, the Champions is built of all survivors. So everyone on our team has been through domestic violence, literally can get in the shoes and start that work immediately with that one phone call instead of calling or getting online and trying to figure out and still them trying to navigate through that path. From that first phone call, the Champions is able to be on that path with you.
I see.
And so how do you market your one call number? Because you're right. I mean, people in need often are bumped around from resource to resource to resource, and having the ability to have one-stop shopping or one call to connect, so to speak, would be extraordinarily useful. So how do you market that number?
So we market that through, of course, our resource information, and then our Champions is out in all of those zip codes. In addition to social media, the Indy Public Safety Foundation website, it looks like the mayor and his team continues to put that number out as well. We will be having a link so that way you can go directly onto the website and click that link and get someone immediately there. That is in the works, just so they can have that one click. But that main thing is we continue to spread that information through social media, through our agencies, through IMPD, through pretty much every business agency that we go into, because the goal is to hit them all, including that employee training, to understand what employers may see in their employees because they have to go to work. We're getting that out face to face, that contact, building those relationships with organizations and agencies.
That's great. That's great. Now, in the second half of our show, I've got something very interesting for you. So first of all, she's going to tell a little about her story. Danyette's going to tell her personal story. And she's going to tell us about the glasses. There's a reason for the sunglasses on top of her head, and a very interesting story behind that. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Danyette Smith, who is Director of Domestic Violence Prevention for the City of Indianapolis. And also, we're joined by my co-host, Mr. Carl Ellison, CEO of Indiana Minority Health Coalition. We'll be right back for the second half.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up, and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
Welcome back to the second part of our talk with Mrs. Danyette Smith, who is the Director of Domestic Violence Prevention for the City of Indianapolis. And as we get into the second part, I want you to tell me a little about your personal story.
Definitely. So I was in domestic violence for 10 years. My oldest daughter was born in 2002, and I got with him in 2004. The first 2 years was a bliss. I mean, like, I couldn't complain at all. But once I got pregnant, once I had my daughter is when that abuse came. So my daughter was not even 6 months old. There was tension just because my child's father had lost a dice game. When I felt that tension, it wasn't anything for me to say, oh, I'm going to be abused or I'm going to be hit after that, but enough for me to be like, okay, I'm just going to leave. Like, y'all have the house, finish doing what y'all doing. He didn't like that. And as I was leaving out, I was able to go out the side door, down, halfway through the driveway to my car. Something told me to turn around. And when I turned around, I was literally on the ground. And that was one blow to the eye. I did not expect it, none whatsoever. And when I got up, I was just holding my eye because by then there's blood everywhere. During that time, I just ran to the backyard. It was a busy street on Inglis Avenue, so it's a two-way traffic, and I was just more so embarrassed. I ran to the backyard, and I just couldn't believe what had happened, and at that moment is when I became silent. I went to the emergency room. Let me take that back. I went to the doctors. I was scared to go to the emergency room because the majority of my family, all my aunties were working in the medical field. I was afraid that one of their friends or they would be there, like I just didn't know their schedule. So I went to an office that was further out that I knew that they wouldn't be there. And one thing I can remember is while there, the lady who was checking me out, she was like, and he sent his cousin with me. He didn't go with me. And his cousin was in the room with me the entire time. And I remember the lady saying, are you in a domestic violence situation? I didn't know what domestic violence meant. I just knew men weren't supposed to hit women. Women don't hit men. And I said no. And then she said, well, are you in danger at your home? And then I just remember looking at his cousin and then just looked back at her and said no. And then she said, well, what happened? And then I told her that I got jumped. At that point, that was the first hit. And then I ended up having double vision, having headaches. So I went to the doctor, let them know, that my eye, they knew that my eye was messed up, but still didn't know how. Went to an eye specialist, and that's when they told me that my socket was fractured. So I currently have 2 plates in my eye. That's the thickness of a milk carton, just to kind of give that thickness of that. From there, they told me I would need surgery. I told my family that came from a car accident that I had while I was pregnant. Someone T-boned me. So I had full support, including him. After I had surgery, I healed, continued on, and that's when the blows continued. Same eye. And when I think about it now, it's like, okay, that must have been his strong hand, just because it was always that same eye. After that, I just started carrying knives. Like I would sleep with knives. Knives would be in, bedroom drawers. It would be in the bathroom, hid. Knives were everywhere. After that, it continued on through emotional abuse. We moved at least 12 times in a 10-year time frame. And it wasn't until 2008 is when, in the midst of an argument, I just looked up to the heavens and I was like, when I get out of this, I'm gonna be who I need. Like I need somebody. I don't know who I need, but I need somebody. And then at that time is when my cousin was like, let's go to lunch. I can't remember what we went to lunch for, but we went to lunch at P.F. Chang's. And she sat across from me and she said, the Spirit is telling me like something is going on. And then I wasn't in church, so I'm like, girl, the Spirit is tripping. Like those are my exact words, the Spirit is tripping. And she said, no, Danyette, seriously, like it's telling me something is wrong.
She knew.
And that's when I cried. Like out of nowhere, I cried. I let her know what was going on. She went back to my family. She let them know. So we had we had lunch on a Friday. On a Sunday, we were all meeting at my auntie's house. They came up with the plan. So like, okay, you go. I was a full-time student. They were like, you go to school. Someone's going to pick you up, bring you back to the house. We'll move everything out. When I say they moved everything out within 45 minutes, a 3-bedroom, full storage in the backyard. Like they moved it all out in 45 minutes. The only thing that they didn't do during that time was we didn't have a plan afterwards. Okay. So it made it easier for me to go back. I moved with my mom, got everything in storage, moved with my mom long enough to graduate. And when I was graduating, he was moving back with me into the house. And then in 2012 is when I started my bachelor's degree in child and family welfare as my concentration. And that's when I learned what domestic violence was. That's when the only thing that was missing out of my schooling, out of my book that I was currently reading, an assignment, was me and my children's names. Like every single thing that it said about domestic violence that my kids were going through, that was all in what I was reading. I sat there and cried. And then at that moment is when I was like, okay, I'm going to study this domestic violence. I'm going to take any free training that I can. Connected with child advocates. They had training. I ended up being a CASA with my first, still in domestic violence, with my first case, domestic violence. So here I am helping someone in a domestic violence situation through the courts and going home in domestic violence. Ultimately, that led to February the 3rd. February 4th of 2014 is when he was texting me. He was not happy that I wasn't texting quick enough. The last text that I got said, "I'm coming to kill you." I was like, it's just going to be another day. And he literally pulled up in front of my job in his white car. I seen it. Everything dropped and stopped in front of me. And then I ended up running to the front door, locking it. He ended up going to the side door. That's when I grabbed the cordless phone and I called 911, and I haven't looked back since.
Good for you. Why do you think it's so hard for a lot of women to make that call or to leave permanently after the first time?
Well, there could be several reasons. There's no concrete reason why. There could be barriers that's preventing them from leaving, whether that's childcare, whether that's the finances, whether that's evictions, charges, that employment. It could be those reasons, but it ultimately also could be that self-love, not understand. Again, if you don't understand what domestic violence is, it's not just a word of a person hitting you. If you don't understand the cycle of domestic violence, it's easy to stay wrapped in it. I talk to victims every day, even today, to where I explained the cycle, and they were like, yes, that's what I'm going through. Once they realize it's a cycle, it's just not their situation, it's easier for them to be like, you're right, like, this ain't gonna change. Nothing I can do will change this. I need to get out. And then that's when it's a different type of plan than just I'm calling, I don't know what it is, but I wanna get out, but I don't want to get out, if that makes sense. Love is powerful as well.
Carl, I think you had a question here that you wanted to ask.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask, within Indianapolis, are there enough shelters for domestic violence victims to be able to, if you will, relocate?
To relocate to a shelter in Indianapolis? No. So we do have our number one shelter, which is, the Julian Center, and they do awesome work with trying to get those victims sheltered, but they have only so much capacity, and that's when we utilize additional funding that is allocated for those situations. When the Julian Center or the Salvation Army is full, we're able to place them in emergency shelter placement, which we don't say what on camera, but we do have allotted funding just for those incidents. So there is not a case where no victim has nowhere to go.
So beyond your organization providing a lifeline, you mentioned that you were a CASI volunteer. I'm not sure any of the audience will know what that is. I'd like to describe that work that you've done.
Yep, so that's a court-appointed advocate. So what that CASA is a voice for the children who are going through the DCS system. So their parents may have gotten a case from DCS, and that means that the judge wants to know what the children are saying without getting it through the parents. So we meet with the children, listen to the children. Of course, if they're infants, then it's more so observing those children, and then you report that back to the judge. So that way, once they go to court, they have all sides of the case.
I see. So the final question I want you to really let us know about is the glasses.
Definitely.
What's the reason for the glasses? You made it a point to wear the glasses. Tell our audience exactly what that means.
And you're the first to get it, but I'm sure not the first to wonder why. There's never been a time, even if you Google me, that I don't have glasses on my head. But those glasses represent those who are still hiding, who are still silent, who are still being battered or abused. I promise I wear them in church. I wore them with the mayor yesterday. I'm going to continue to wear them because it's not a fashion statement for me, but it's a victim statement for me, letting me know that victims are still out there. I started wearing glasses when I got my first black eye. And I haven't stopped wearing glasses just because I know there are other victims out there with black eyes that are hiding, that are shielding, but hoping that they can get out of domestic violence.
Oh, wow. So you've been listening to a very interesting story from the director of domestic violence prevention for the city of Indianapolis, Ms. Danyette Smith. And IMHC will have our annual event on October 26th that you can register for now. And that's at www.imhc.org. You can go and register to be a part of the event and look at the live webinar that we're doing. We'll be talking about prevention and resources and things of that nature. And we'll have some people that'll be standing in unison to talk about how you might be able to help a family member. Before Carl asks his final question or makes his final statement, I just want to thank you, and I'm glad that you were able to step away. What happened to our intern was very tragic, and we lost an intern to domestic violence, and that's why our CEO put all this together and made it a point for you to be on our show today. Carl, I'll let you close.
Well, Daniel, all I can say is thank you so much for being a voice and for sharing your voice with us in this audience.
No, thank you.
We need more heroes like you.
Absolutely, Shiro.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you for allowing me to be the voice.
Thank you. So I'm going to mention it again, October 26th. We will have Ms. Danyette Smith as part of our webinar, and you can register at www.imhc.org. And when you register, you can be male, female, it doesn't matter. And we will be giving away gift cards to the first 100 registrants. You'll be entered into a contest to win 3 gift cards we're going to give away. So thank you very much for joining us for Indiana Minority Health's Minority Health Matters. Till next time, I'm Troy Julian Gibson.
Growing up where I did, a lot of things could have gotten in the way of my goals, but I learned to push through, and that's what I bring to work every day.
They say you don't have to be so strong, but this is my mother, my purpose. Strength is not optional. See, I lift her now like she raised me then, so I know my strength is super, but I'm still human.
Oh, look who's here.